I never thought a simple missed flight could change the course of my entire life. That Friday evening, Chicago O'Hare was its usual chaos. Lines of travelers dragging suitcases, families saying quick goodbyes, impatient businessmen tapping on their phones. I was one of them, running through the terminal like my life depended on it, clutching my boarding pass for the last flight to Indianapolis. My mother was turning 70, and I had promised I would be there for the family dinner. She'd been counting on me, reminding me over the phone all week. But by the time I reached the gate, the doors were already closed. I stood there, breathless, staring at the sealed jet bridge as if sheer willpower could force it open. The plane was pulling away, and with it went my chance of keeping that promise. My heart sank. I felt like a failure. 70 is a milestone, and I couldn't even make it home on time. I wanted to cry, scream, anything to release the frustration building in my chest. Instead, I just froze there, my suitcase handle gripped tightly in my hand, the fluorescent airport lights buzzing overhead. That was when I noticed her. She was standing a little away from the crowd, near one of the vending machines. An older woman, small and frail-looking, wrapped in a long patterned shawl that didn't quite fit the setting of a modern airport. Her hair was silver, braided loosely, and her eyes were sharp, too sharp for a woman her age. She was watching me, as if she had been waiting for me. I tried to ignore her. The last thing I needed was a stranger approaching me when I was already on the verge of tears. But as I pulled my suitcase and started toward the escalator, she stepped directly into my path. Her voice carried a faint Eastern European accent, low and deliberate. "You missed your flight," she said softly, almost like an accusation. I froze, startled. "Excuse me." She tilted her head, studying me as though she could read every secret written on my face. Then she reached into her shawl and pulled out something small, gleaming under the harsh airport lights. A silver needle. She held it out to me with both hands, her expression solemn. "Take this," she whispered. "Check your husband, and you'll see the truth." For a moment, I just stared at her, my mind scrambling to catch up with what was happening. My husband? What truth? The words sounded absurd, even sinister. A needle? Who hands a stranger a needle in the middle of an airport? I wanted to laugh it off, to walk away and forget this unsettling encounter. But something in her eyes stopped me. There was no mockery, no trick, just certainty. "I think you've got the wrong person," I said, my voice trembling despite myself. "I don't know what you're talking about." She didn't argue. She simply pressed the needle closer to me, her hand surprisingly steady for someone her age. "You'll know soon enough," she said. "Don't ignore it." I should have refused. I should have called security, or at the very least walked away. But I didn't. Instead, with my heart pounding, I slowly reached out and closed my fingers around the cold silver. It was heavier than I expected, chilling against my palm. When I looked up again, she was gone. No footsteps, no trace of her in the crowd. Just vanished, as though she had never been there at all. I stood alone in that bustling terminal, clutching the needle, 1,000 questions storming in my head. I told myself it was nonsense, that I was tired, emotional, vulnerable. And yet, deep inside, I felt something stir, a sense of dread I couldn't shake. I didn't know it then, but that silver needle would tear apart everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my husband, and the life we had built together. The taxi ride back to the suburbs felt endless, the city lights blurring past the window like streaks of neon on black canvas. My suitcase was at my side, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop replaying the scene at O'Hare, the fortune teller, her accent, that silver needle, now tucked deep into my purse. I told myself it was ridiculous. I was a grown woman, not someone who believed in omens or strangers' cryptic warnings. And yet, her words echoed in my ears. "Check your husband, and you'll see the truth." 15 years of marriage. 15 years with David Miller. From the outside, people thought we had it all. A nice home in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. 2 steady careers, vacations when we could afford them, dinners with friends. But beneath the surface, cracks had been forming for years, arguments that never fully resolved. David's long nights at the office, his phone calls he always took in another room, the way he seemed distant even when we sat side by side on the couch. I told myself it was just the strain of adulthood, that every marriage carried its weight. Still, something inside me knew the foundation wasn't as solid as I pretended. By the time the taxi turned onto our street, my stomach was twisted into knots. The familiar row of townhouses stood in the glow of street lamps, looking peaceful, almost too peaceful. I paid the driver, dragged my suitcase up the front steps, and unlocked the door as quietly as I could. The house smelled faintly of cologne and expensive whiskey, David's favorites. I was about to call his name when voices drifted from the living room. I froze, the handle of my suitcase slipping from my grip. David's voice, low and tense, and another man's unfamiliar, deeper, carrying a tone that didn't belong in our home. I slipped off my shoes and moved closer, pressing myself against the wall where the hallway opened toward the living room. From there, I could see shadows shifting under the lamplight, their figures moving just out of my direct line of sight. "You owe him," the stranger said, his voice sharp, almost threatening. "I know," David replied quickly, his words clipped. "I just need more time." "Time?" The man let out a short, humorless laugh. "Silverman doesn't care about your excuses. 1.5 million, David. That was the deal. You don't pay, you don't get to walk away." My heart nearly stopped. 1.5 million? Silverman? I had never heard that name before, but the way the stranger said it made my skin crawl. David's tone shifted, desperate now. "I'll get it. Just give me a week. I can move some money, sell some assets. He doesn't need to worry." "You don't make promises to George Silverman you can't keep," the man snapped. "Because if you fail, you won't be the only one paying the price." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. David, my David, owing money to a man like that? A crime boss? A debt of $1.5 million? It sounded unreal, like something out of a gangster film, not the life of the man I married. I edged back slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't want them to know I was home. I needed to think, to process what I had just heard. Every instinct screamed at me to run into that room, demand answers, shake the truth out of David right there. But the memory of that stranger's voice, cold, dangerous, held me still. So I stayed silent, hidden, my body pressed flat against the wall, my breath shallow, straining to hear every word. Because whatever was happening in that living room was bigger, darker, than anything I had ever imagined about my husband's life. And for the first time in 15 years, I realized I might not know the man I married at all. The next morning, David moved around the house as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, scrolled through his phone, adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. His calmness was unnerving, almost insulting, as though I had only imagined the conversation with that stranger. I wanted to scream at him, to demand the truth, but I bit my tongue. The words of the fortune teller still echoed in my head. "Check your husband, and you'll see the truth." When David finally stepped into the shower, I saw my chance. I went into our bedroom, my hands trembling as I pulled one of his shirts from the closet. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, proof, reassurance, anything to make sense of what I'd overheard. My eyes fell to the silver needle resting inside my purse. I hesitated. It felt ridiculous, almost childish, but something in me whispered to try. I ran the point of the needle gently along the seams of his shirt, dragging it across the stitching like I was unraveling a secret. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fabric gave way with a faint tear. My heart leapt into my throat. I reached inside and pulled out a tiny plastic packet sewn into the lining. Inside were several small pills, pale and crystalline, and a folded slip of paper with a phone number scrawled in red ink. My hands went cold. These weren't vitamins or aspirin. This was something else, something that didn't belong in a suburban home. Tucked away in a husband's shirt like a hidden treasure. I stared at the pills, horror crawling through me. Suddenly, I heard the bathroom door open. David emerged, towels slung around his waist, water dripping from his hair. His eyes locked on the packet in my hand. For a split second, his face drained of color. "What are you doing with that?" he demanded, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "I should be asking you." I shot back, my fingers tightening around the packet. "What is this, David? Why was it hidden in your shirt?" He crossed the room quickly, snatching the packet from me with a practiced motion. "It's nothing," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Just supplements. Nootropics. Smart drugs. Everyone in finance takes them these days to stay sharp." I glared at him, unable to believe the casual way he said it. "Smart drugs? Hidden in your shirt? Are you serious? You expect me to believe that?" David sighed heavily, running a hand through his damp hair. "Veronica, please. You're overreacting. You always do this. Take something small and blow it out of proportion. I'm under a lot of stress at work, and these just help me focus. That's all." But his eyes betrayed him. I could see it in the way he wouldn't meet my gaze, the way his hands shook ever so slightly as he shoved the packet into his briefcase. He wasn't telling the truth. I wanted to press him harder, to rip open the rest of his shirts and search every seam. But fear stopped me. Fear of what else I might find. Fear of confirming what my heart already suspected. David kissed me on the cheek as he grabbed his keys, his smile too smooth, too deliberate. "Don't worry so much," he said lightly, as if we hadn't just stared at each other over a bag of hidden drugs. Then he walked out the door, leaving me alone in the silence of our bedroom. I sank onto the bed, the silver needle still in my hand, my pulse racing. I had found the first crack in his carefully constructed facade, and it terrified me. Because if David could lie so easily about this, then what else was he hiding? By late afternoon, I could feel the tension in the house thickening like smoke. David paced the living room, his tie loosened, his phone clutched in his hand as if it were an anchor. He hadn't mentioned the pills, hadn't acknowledged the confrontation that morning. Instead, he kept muttering about meetings, deadlines, liquidity issues. His words were frantic, rehearsed, and meaningless. Then came the knock. Heavy, deliberate, nothing like a neighbor's polite tap. I froze in the kitchen, listening. David straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The man I'd overheard the night before stood there, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit that didn't hide the menace in his posture. His eyes flicked past David and landed on me for just a moment, cold and assessing, before returning to my husband. "You've got until the end of the week," he said flatly. His voice was deep, measured, and carried the weight of someone who never had to repeat himself. "Silverman doesn't like waiting. 1.5 million, David. That was the deal. If you don't deliver, it won't just be your problem anymore." I gripped the counter to steady myself, my chest tightening with panic. The man's words made my blood run cold. $1.5 million. How could David possibly owe that much? David's voice shook as he responded. "I'll get it. I swear. I just need a little more time. I can move things around." The man cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Time's run out. End of the week. No more excuses." He turned and walked away without another word, his footsteps echoing down the front path like a countdown. David shut the door and leaned against it, his hand pressed to his forehead. He didn't even look at me. For a long moment, the only sound in the house was the ticking of the clock on the wall. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. Part of me was too afraid of what I might hear. That night, I barely touched my dinner. David sat across from me, pushing food around his plate, his face drawn and pale. He tried to offer me a strained smile, muttered something about work stress, but his eyes gave him away. He was unraveling. When the sun set and the neighborhood quieted, I sat by the bedroom window, staring out at the street below. The suburban calm felt like a cruel disguise, a thin mask over something dangerous lurking in the shadows. It happened just after 10. I heard the rumble of an engine, low and deliberate, and then the crunch of tires on our driveway. My heart lurched. A black SUV rolled to a stop outside our house, its tinted windows reflecting nothing but darkness. I rushed to the window, peeking through the curtains. 4 men got out, broad, armed, moving with military precision. My pulse hammered in my ears. David must have heard it too. He appeared in the hallway, his face drained of all color. He looked at me, just for a second, as if he wanted to say something, maybe even apologize. But the words never came. The men pounded on the door. This time, David didn't resist. He opened it slowly, his hands raised slightly in surrender. "Mr. Miller," one of them said almost politely, "you're coming with us." Before I could move, before I could scream, they surrounded him, guiding him firmly but not gently down the steps. "Wait," I whispered to myself, my hand pressed against the cold glass of the window. But I didn't dare go outside. I couldn't. They shoved him into the back of the SUV. The door slammed shut, the engine roared, and within seconds the vehicle disappeared into the night, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. I stood frozen, staring at the empty driveway, my body trembling uncontrollably. My husband was gone, taken, and I had no idea if I'd ever see him alive again. The silence after the SUV disappeared was unbearable. I stood at the window long after the taillights vanished, my body numb, my breath shallow. When I finally moved, it was like I was on autopilot. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so violently I could barely type. There was only one person I could call, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but whose voice I needed to hear. Andy Summers. We had gone to college together, and for a time he'd been one of my closest friends. Life had pulled us in different directions, but I knew he had joined law enforcement, eventually working for the DEA. If anyone could help me make sense of what I'd just witnessed, it was him. He answered on the second ring. "Veronica? It's been years. What's wrong?" The dam broke. The words tumbled out of me in a frantic rush. David's strange behavior, the fortune teller's warning, the hidden pills, the man at the door, and finally, the black SUV that had taken my husband into the night. Andy listened without interrupting. When I finally fell silent, choking on my own fear, his voice came steady, grounded, the way I remembered. "Veronica, you need to stay calm. George Silverman is real. He's not just some thug. He's one of the biggest drug kingpins in Chicago. If David's tangled up with him, you're in serious danger too." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. So it was true. The stranger in my house hadn't been bluffing. "I don't understand," I whispered. "David, he's not that kind of man." Andy sighed. "I've seen good people get trapped in bad debts. But if what you found in his shirt is what I think it is, this is bigger than gambling or money trouble. Do you still have it?" "Yes," I admitted. I pulled open the drawer where I had hidden the packet, my fingers brushing against the cold edge of the silver needle lying beside it. "I kept it. Don't touch it anymore. I'm sending a team over." Less than an hour later, 2 unmarked cars pulled up outside my townhouse. Men in plain clothes stepped out, flashing badges at the door. They searched the living room, then examined the packet carefully, snapping photos and speaking in low, clipped voices. One of them, a tall agent with gray at his temples, came over to me. "This isn't medicine," he said bluntly. "It's synthetic meth. Strong, dangerous, and not the kind of thing someone carries around for personal use." I felt the room tilt around me, my knees threatening to give way. My husband, my David, had hidden illegal drugs in his clothing, and I had been the one to find them. Andy stayed on the line the whole time, his voice steady in my ear. "You did the right thing calling me. Keep that needle close, Veronica. If it led you to this, it might lead you to more. But be careful. You're in the middle of something very dangerous now." When the agents left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the silver needle resting in my palm. Its point gleamed under the overhead light, sharp and cold, like a question I wasn't ready to answer. But deep down, I knew Andy was right. I couldn't stop here. I had to dig deeper, no matter how terrifying the truth might be. After the agents left, the house felt unbearably empty. Their footsteps faded, but the echo of their words remained. Synthetic meth, dangerous, criminal. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the packet they had confiscated, my mind spinning. David wasn't just hiding secrets, he was drowning in them. Sleep was impossible. Long after midnight, I found myself pacing the living room, the silver needle clutched tightly in my hand. I don't know what compelled me. Fear, instinct, or maybe that woman's haunting words. But something inside urged me to keep searching, to check again. I pulled open drawers, sifted through David's briefcase, rifled through the closet. Nothing. Finally, my eyes fell on the corner of the rug in our bedroom. Something about the way it sat, slightly uneven against the hardwood, caught my attention. I knelt down, pushed the rug aside, and froze. There, nearly invisible, was a small cut in the floorboard. My pulse quickened. With trembling fingers, I pried at the edge until the plank lifted, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside was a plain black flash drive and a folded envelope with my name scrawled on the front in David's handwriting. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My name, written by the same hand that had once scribbled love notes, anniversary cards, promises of forever. Now it looked like a farewell. I carried both to the desk, my hands unsteady. I opened the envelope first. The letter was short, written in rushed, uneven script. "Veronica, if you're reading this, then it means I've run out of time. I never wanted this life for you. There are things about me you don't know, things I couldn't tell you without putting you in danger. Plug in the drive. You'll understand. Whatever you do, give it to Andy. Trust him, and find the woman who gave you the needle. She's not who she seems. She can help you. I love you." David tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to open the laptop and insert the USB. The screen flickered, then filled with David's face. He looked exhausted, older than the man I had kissed goodbye just days ago. His eyes carried a heaviness I had never seen before. "My name is David Miller," he began, his voice low, steady. "For the past 15 years, I've lived a double life. On the surface, I've been a husband, a businessman, your partner. But in reality, I was recruited by the DEA to infiltrate George Silverman's organization. I went in deep, deeper than anyone expected, and for years I reported everything. Every deal, every shipment, every name. But the longer I stayed, the harder it became to walk away." He paused, running a hand over his face. "Then I met you, and everything changed. I wanted out. I thought I could cut ties, build a life with you, leave that world behind. But I was wrong. Silverman suspects. He knows too much. If he finds me, if he finds us, we're both in danger." My chest tightened as his eyes lifted to the camera, filled with something raw and unguarded. "Veronica, you have to trust Andy. He's the only one who can keep you safe. And the woman you met, the one who gave you the needle, she's not just a fortune teller. She's undercover, part of this operation. Find her. She'll know what to do." He leaned closer, his voice breaking. "I love you. That part was never a lie. Please believe that. Whatever happens, remember that I loved you." The video ended abruptly, the screen going black. I sat frozen, my hands pressed against my mouth, my heart shattering with every word. My husband wasn't just drowning in debt. He was a man caught between two lives, agent and criminal, husband and stranger. And now, because of him, I was trapped in the crossfire. I looked down at the silver needle gleaming under the desk lamp. It felt heavier than ever, as though it carried not just metal, but the weight of every secret, every danger, every truth I wasn't ready to face. The day after I watched David's confession, Andy called. His voice was tense, clipped. "We need to move you, Veronica. Silverman's people might come looking. Pack light." Within the hour, I was in the back of an unmarked sedan, city streets flashing past the window. My pulse raced, my fingers clutching the strap of my bag where the silver needle and the USB drive were hidden. The agents didn't tell me where we were going, only that someone important needed to speak with me. They led me into a nondescript office building downtown, the kind you'd walk past without a second glance. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls smelled faintly of stale coffee. Waiting in a small conference room was a man I'd never seen before. He stood when I entered, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples. His eyes were piercing, calculating, and yet his smile was almost warm. He extended a hand. "Mrs. Miller." "My name is Stan Vreshin," he said smoothly. "I worked with your husband. I was his handler." The words hit me like a jolt. Handler. So David's video hadn't been a lie? My throat tightened. Stan gestured for me to sit. "I know you must be overwhelmed." David was deep undercover for years. The things he did, the things he sacrificed, you have no idea. But what you saw on that video was true. He was one of us, and he was very, very good at it. I searched his face, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. If that's true, then why is he gone? Why did they take him? Stan's expression hardened. "Because you can't just walk away from Silverman." David tried, but they caught on. "Now we're trying to figure out how to get him back before it's too late. That's why I need that USB. It has the evidence we need to finish this." My hand tightened around my bag under the table. Something about his eagerness unsettled me. The way he leaned forward, the way his eyes flicked to my purse as though he already knew where it was. And then, faintly in my ear, Andy's voice crackled through the small earpiece the agents had given me earlier. "Veronica, listen to me carefully. Don't trust him. He's the mole." The blood drained from my face. My gaze snapped back to Stan, who was still talking, his voice calm, persuasive, rehearsed. A mole. If Andy was right, then the man sitting across from me wasn't here to help. He was here to finish what Silverman had started. I forced a shaky smile, nodding as if I believed every word. But inside, panic clawed at my chest. Who was telling the truth? David in his desperate video? Stan with his steady, confident voice? Or Andy, whispering warnings from the shadows? For the first time since this nightmare began, I realized I was no longer just a bystander. I was holding something everyone wanted. And no matter what I chose to believe, someone was going to pay the price. Stan kept talking, his tone calm and steady, as if every word was meant to soothe me into surrender. But the unease in my gut wouldn't fade. My fingers twitched around the strap of my purse, where the USB and silver needle were hidden. I tried to focus on his words, but my eyes kept darting around the room, looking for something, anything, that might confirm or deny his story. That's when I saw it. On the corner of his desk, half hidden beneath a stack of files, was a glossy photo. My breath caught in my throat. It was David, handcuffed, bruised, a man's hand gripping his shoulder. My stomach lurched, but something about it was wrong. Too clean, too staged. I reached out before I could stop myself, pulling the photo free. Stan stiffened, but didn't stop me. Up close, I saw what my gut had already suspected. The edges were off. The background behind David was a flat green, poorly blurred out. My husband hadn't been photographed in a cell. He'd been pasted onto one. I looked up, my voice trembling. "This is fake. Why would you show me this?" The mask slipped. Stan's smile disappeared, his eyes narrowing into something cold and predatory. He rose slowly from his chair, his hand moving to his jacket. In a flash, he pulled a gun and leveled it at me. "You should have just handed over the drive," he said, his voice stripped of all pretense. "Would have been easier for both of us." My heart hammered, my mouth dry. I clutched my purse tighter, every muscle in my body screaming to move, but frozen by the sight of that weapon. Then chaos erupted. The door behind me slammed open, and the room filled with shouting. "DA, drop your weapon!" Agents in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised. Stan didn't drop his gun. Instead, he lunged toward me, seizing my arm and dragging me close, the barrel pressed hard against my temple. "Nobody moves!" he roared, using me as a shield. I gasped, my pulse racing so fast I thought I'd pass out. The agents froze, their guns trained but hesitant. Stan's breath was hot against my ear, his grip like iron. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was survival, maybe it was the memory of that fortune teller's voice, whispering that the needle would reveal the truth. My hand dove into my purse. My fingers closed around the cold, sharp silver. Without thinking, I swung it backward with all the strength I had. The point of the needle drove deep into his chest. Stan let out a strangled gasp, his grip loosening. I wrenched free just as the agents surged forward, shots firing, shouts filling the room. The world became a blur of noise and movement. Glass shattering, men shouting, the acrid sting of gunpowder filling the air. I stumbled to the corner, clutching the needle slick with his blood, my body shaking uncontrollably. Across the room, Stan collapsed, his gun clattering to the floor as agents swarmed over him. "The needle finds the heart," I whispered, the words escaping me before I even realized I was speaking. The chaos subsided, the gunfire ceased, and the agents secured the scene. But I stood there frozen, staring at the silver needle in my trembling hand. It had started as a strange trinket, a bizarre gift from a stranger at an airport. Now it was a weapon, a lifeline, the only thing that had saved me from becoming another one of Silverman's casualties. And in that moment, I understood the needle wasn't just meant to reveal the truth. It was meant to pierce it, no matter how dark or deadly it turned out to be. When the gunfire stopped, the room felt hollow, stripped of air. Agents moved quickly, securing weapons, cuffing Stan as he writhed on the floor, blood seeping through his shirt. He was alive but beaten. His eyes found mine as they dragged him upright, and for the first time I saw the truth in them. Not power, not control, but fear. I stood frozen against the wall, the silver needle still clenched in my hand, my knuckles white. One of the agents gently guided me to a chair, his voice calm, practiced. "You're safe now, Mrs. Miller. We've got him." Safe. The word rang hollow, because even with Stan in custody, nothing felt resolved. He was only one piece of a larger puzzle, and the picture still didn't make sense. Back at the field office, Andy met me with a grave expression. He didn't congratulate me or try to comfort me. Instead, he placed the USB on the table between us. "This drive has enough evidence to put Silverman away for life," he said. "But it still doesn't answer the question you're afraid to ask." I stared at the flash drive, its small, unassuming shape hiding a weight that could crush an empire. My hands trembled as I traced the edges of it, remembering David's face in the video, his desperate confession, his pleas for me to believe him. Was he really an undercover agent who had fallen too deep? Or had he been a criminal all along, spinning one last lie to cover his tracks? And he seemed to read my thoughts. "Veronica, I want to believe him. I really do. But the truth is we don't know. Not yet." Those words shattered something inside me. For 15 years, I had built my life around this man. Shared meals, vacations, holidays, quiet nights on the couch. Laughter, fights, forgiveness. The daily rhythm of a marriage that felt ordinary, even comforting. And now, standing in the ruins, I couldn't tell what had been real and what had been performance. Memories crowded in, sharp and bittersweet. The way David used to bring me flowers on Fridays. The nights he stayed out late, always with an excuse. The moments he held me close after my mother's funeral, when his comfort had felt so solid, so genuine. Were those moments truth, or lies told with enough conviction to feel real? I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to hold back tears. I don't know who my husband is anymore, I whispered. Andy's voice softened. Then the only thing you can do is prepare yourself for both answers. One will break your heart. The other might break your trust forever. But either way, you'll survive it. His words didn't soothe me. They only deepened the ache in my chest. That night, alone in the guest quarters they provided, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silver needle rested on the nightstand beside me, catching the dim light. I thought of the fortune teller at O'Hare, her piercing eyes, her warning. The needle had led me here, to truths I wished I'd never uncovered. And as I drifted between exhaustion and grief, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If I couldn't trust the man I had shared my life with, then who could I trust at all? The next morning, Andy met me in the briefing room, the USB drive lying between us like a ticking bomb. His expression was tired, drawn, but resolute. We'll keep digging, he promised. The evidence on here will go a long way toward dismantling Silverman's network. But as for David, he paused, searching for words that wouldn't cut as deep. We can't confirm his status yet. He may have been an agent. He may have gone rogue. Until we know for sure, all we have are possibilities. I nodded, though the words landed like stones in my chest. Possibilities. That was all my marriage had become. 15 years of love and laughter reduced to a question mark no one could erase. The agents escorted me back to the safe house later that day. The city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm. Cars honking, trains screeching, people rushing to work, but it all felt distant, muffled, as though I was watching life through glass. Inside the quiet room, I sat alone at the small table, the silver needle in my hand. I turned it over slowly, the metal catching the light, sharp and unyielding. I remembered the woman at O'Hare, her piercing eyes, her strange accent, her words that had haunted me ever since. The needle will reveal the truth, no matter how bitter. At the time, it had sounded like nonsense, a cryptic message from a stranger. Now it felt like prophecy. The needle had torn open the seams of David's carefully constructed life, spilling secrets I never asked to see. It had led me through deception, danger, betrayal, and ultimately to the realization that nothing is more terrifying than the truth. I thought about David's face in the video, the way his voice cracked when he told me he loved me. I thought about the hidden pills, the menacing visits, the SUV that swallowed him whole. I thought about every night we had spent together, every memory now tainted by doubt. But beneath the grief, beneath the anger, something else had taken root. A steel I hadn't known I possessed. For years, I had been blind, accepting half answers, overlooking late nights, excusing every inconsistency. That woman at the airport hadn't just given me a needle. She had forced me to open my eyes. Whether David was an agent or a traitor, whether our marriage had been truth or illusion, no longer mattered as much as it once had, because I was no longer the woman who lived in his shadow. I lifted the needle, its point glinting like a shard of ice, and whispered to myself, I'm ready to face whatever comes. For the first time since this nightmare began, the fear didn't consume me. It lingered, yes, but beneath it was resolve. I didn't know what the future held, answers, heartbreak, or maybe more questions. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't the same woman who had missed her flight at O'Hare. And whatever truth the needle revealed next, I would be ready to meet it head on.